My name is Eric Ross, and I'm going to be discussing the grounding of the Boeing 737 MAX, from the crashes that caused it to be grounded, what caused the crashes, the impacts of the grounding, what they're doing to fix the issue today, and then also my own opinion on the matter. So what is the Boeing 737 MAX? It is a commercial jet that Boeing decided to build to compete with the Airbus 320neo. Airbus claimed that the A320neo will be 6% more fuel efficient than anything that was flying at the time of 2010. Airlines went crazy over this because any percentage that they could save on gas saved them millions of dollars each year. Boeing had to act fast to avoid Airbus taking over the market. They decided to just update the older 737 model and tried to do it in record timing. Boeing made two huge promises about the 737 MAX. First, they said it would be 8% more efficient than the Airbus A320neo, and also that pilots would need little to no training to be able to fly this plane. Airlines loved this. They went crazy, and Boeing saw a massive amount of orders come in as soon as they released it. But the success of the 737 MAX did not last very long. Two crashes ultimately led to the grounding of the 737 MAX. First, there was Lion Air Flight 610 on October 29, 2018, and that was followed a few months later by Ethiopian Airlines Flight 302 on March 10, 2019. These two flights totaled in 346 deaths. They both crashed in a similar pattern where the pilot felt the plane nosedive, immediately climbed, and then nosedived again, and continually went through this process a couple times before ultimately losing control and going into the ground. After the first crash, the plane was not grounded at all. Once a second crash occurred, though, countries and airlines immediately started grounding the planes. In fact, in just 3 days, all of the planes that had been sold in the world were grounded. One thing that is interesting about the whole grounding process, though, is that the US waited until 3 days after the crash to ground it, which made them one of the last world powers to ground the plane. So, what ultimately led to the downfall of this cutting-edge commercial jet? An algorithm called the Maneuvering Characteristics Augmentation System, also known as the MCAS. When designing the plane, engineers faced the challenge of fitting the bigger, more efficient engine onto the older body of the 737. To make it fit, they had to mount the engine higher up and further up on the plane than it was in past models. This caused the plane to handle in a different way when flying at high angles of attack. This difference in handling would force the 737 MAX to register for a new type certificate rather than stay on the same one as past 737 models. Getting a new certificate would crumble one of Boeing's two promises about the MAX. Pilots would need more training than what they would have wanted if it got a new type certificate. To stay true to this promise, Boeing installed the MCAS, which would alter the pitch of the plane during high angle of attack to make the difference in handling unnoticeable and therefore allow the MAX to stay on the same type certificate. But investigations after the second crash revealed the numerous issues that there were with the MCAS. Throughout the current ongoing investigations, there have been quite a few concerns about the implementation of the MCAS. First, the FAA. Every time that a new plane comes out seeking the same type certification as an older model, they write up a report, and this report tracks all the changes from the older model to the new model. In the 737 MAX's case, the MCAS was not mentioned in this report at all, which is pretty crazy to think because they even went as detailed to talk about the different seatbelts that would be used. In a different report, they did mention the MCAS though, where they approved the system, but they approved the system to where it could adjust the pitch of the plane by 0.6 degrees. Meanwhile, the system that was actually installed and implemented could adjust the pitch of the plane by 2.5 degrees. In that same report, they rated the MCAS as a hazardous system, which means if it fails, it can lead to serious, if not fatal, injuries. And these hazardous systems are normally required to have multiple redundancies and less than a 1 in 10 million chance of failing. During the time that the 737 MAX was flying, there were issues reported with the angle of attack sensors 50 times. The plane flew 1.7 million flights during that stretch, which is nowhere near the safety percentage that should be required by the FAA. To make these reoccurring failures even more concerning, there were no redundancies for the MCAS. It was fed by a single sensor that had no back checks, nothing else. It's just one sensor that if it failed or stopped working could cause the plane to go out of control like it did on the 2 occasions of the crashes. If not having redundancies for the MCAS wasn't enough, Boeing made a huge mistake by trying to keep the MCAS silent. They did not tell any pilots about it throughout the whole process, and if any pilot kind of noticed the system might have been there or felt like something was off and asked about it, Boeing pushed the question away and really did not acknowledge the issue of it. It's really crazy that Boeing did not tell pilots about it, because the pilots could have maybe prevented the crashes that occurred if they had known and gone through a simple training on how to turn off the system when it malfunctions and how to regain control of the plane. So far, the grounding has had an impact on 3 key stakeholders: the FAA, the airlines, and obviously Boeing. The FAA's reputation took a big hit because not only did they certify this plane that ended up having a fatal flaw and end up causing the deaths of hundreds, they also took a long time grounding it after that second crash. The airlines took a really big hit too. They had to immediately cancel hundreds of flights, which cost them hundreds of millions of dollars. And on top of that, they have to decide what to do with the 737. Do they take a chance and continue flying it after Boeing reports they have a fix? Or do they just scrap them and spend another couple $100 million trying to replace the 737s they had in their fleet? And then there's Boeing. So far, it's cost Boeing millions of dollars trying to fix the MCAS. They're also going to have to pay compensation to all of the airlines and all of the family members of people that died in the crash. It's also been reported that Boeing is at risk of losing $30 billion in orders that airlines may decide to cancel. Boeing will have to face multiple legal battles due to the crashes and the grounding. They'll face off with any airline that has the 737 MAXs and is looking for compensation for the revenue they lost due to the grounding. On top of this, Boeing will have to face wrongful death lawsuits from the families of the victims of the crashes looking for compensation for the loss of their loved ones. Since this is such a recent issue, they're still in the process of trying to fix the mistakes they made. The FAA has said they're committing more inspectors to the evaluation process of type certificates and plane inspection to ensure that they don't make the same mistake they made with the 737 MAX. Boeing has a lot higher stakes in what they need to fix. They have a $1 million business plan with the 737 MAX, and they're at risk of losing all of that. They first needed to rework the software so it would actually work properly. They also decided they're actually going to include the MCAS in manuals, which is really interesting that they didn't have that from the beginning. They are currently working towards regaining the 737 MAX's registration and hope that that will be done by August 3rd of 2019. Boeing is at fault for pretty much everything and should have to pay up in every way that they're going to be expected to. I think that they don't deserve to win any of the suits against the airlines because they screwed the airlines out of their money by giving them a plane that was ineffective and truly not flight worthy. They also screwed over the airlines by failing to tell the pilots about the MCAS system, which was really a big concern for a lot of pilots in the process because they were complaining a lot about, oh, what is this? Like, we never heard about this, and then it activated in flight to the extreme and they didn't know what to actually do. And also, Boeing should compensate the families of the victims of the crashes because it ultimately is Boeing's fault for the crashes and for the deaths of all those people. The FAA carries some responsibility too because their inspections failed and they let the system slide, which was not safe. They let it slide in a sense that they okayed a weaker version and then allowed a more powerful version, which ultimately caused the crashes to be installed. And that is the case of the Boeing 737 MAX.